So you saw my video where I cut the cover crops down and I mulched them. I laid them under cardboard and I mulched on top of that. So that's this bed.
That's a chicken!
So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to deal with this bed here. Now this has got some cover crops going on, but what I've done is I underplanted these cover crops with onions in the winter. So what I'm going to do with these cover crops is, rather than use the method that I used on the other bed where I cut them down and mulch them, what I'm going to do, I'm going to just do chop and drop with this. So with this bed, what we're going to do is we're just going to do chop and drop. So literally, just chop the plants into little bits. And I'm going to use this as the mulch. So we're going to just chop it right down to the ground, chop all the bits, and I'm going to allow it to fall in between the onions that are growing. This method of using chop and drop cover crops is not as efficient as the one that I did at last time, but it's another style, especially when you've got things that are growing underneath. So because I underplanted this with onions, while this is rotting down on top, it'll suppress some of the weeds, it'll feed the soil, and it'll let the onions grow in between. One of the bulbs here has been pulled out, so I'll stick that back in. You can see my onions coming up here, some of my onions coming up here. So we'll just chop and drop this in and around this area. I'm trying to be careful not to chop the onions down, but admittedly I am missing a shot every now and then. So that's fine, but that's fine. I mean, onions are pretty resilient, so they'll survive. So now what we've done with this bed is we've cut the cover crops right down to the ground, and we're just going to leave them on the top to rot down, and the worms to feed and drag it down into the soil. Now, one of the objections that you get to this method, especially with chop and drop in a vegetable garden, is that it encourages slugs. These plants are going to be food for surface feeders, and slugs are included in that. So what the thing to do is to make sure when you do chop and drop, and you do chop and drop in a vegetable garden, the thing to do is to make sure that you do the chop and drop around plants that are not going to be really affected by slugs. So that's why I'm doing it around my onions. So the other areas that I would use chop and drop in is around trees to mulch them, around garlic to mulch that. But what I'd done with this was, because I'd planted the cover crops and I'd underplanted it with onions, we had two things growing at the same time. When the onions came up and the cover crops are ready to be chopped down, we've chopped the cover crops down, and we're going to allow the onions to come up, and that's going to feed this bed going forward. The other method that we used, where we chopped the cover crops down, sheet mulched, and then added a layer of mulch over the top. Now that's going to be more suitable for other vegetables that may be susceptible to slugs. You can plant that there, because it's not going to be at the surface. The food's not going to be at the surface for the slugs to get at. Now here, chopping and drop, this chop and drop method, I'm not too worried about the slugs, because it is around plants that aren't going to be affected by slugs. So that's a quick one on cover crops and how we do chop and drop and where to do chop and drop. So I was having a discussion with someone, quite a prominent gardener, a blogger, who was suggesting that this method of chop and drop would encourage slugs. This is a sort of explanation of why this method of gardening won't encourage slugs, and if it does, it's not a problem. I'm just going to spread some of this mulch out. The roots that are inside, I'm going to leave them there to rot down into the soil, because what that'll do is it'll create a compost corridor for me. So as far as those roots go down, once the plant starts to die away, the roots will rot underground, and it'll feed the soil from there, and it'll create a compost corridor. And the plants at the top that I've cut down, they're going to slowly rot down. They'll suppress weeds while they're there, and they'll feed the soil, and it'll benefit my onions. If you haven't seen my cover crop planting video, go and check that out. And if you haven't seen my video where I sheet mulch over the top of the cover crops, so how you can use cover crops in a no-dig bed, go and check that out. I'm going to leave it there for this one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.